OK. Drahé priateľky, drahí priatelia, čitateľky a čitatelia a fanúšičky a fanúšikovia dobrej literatúry z vydavateľstva Absynt, vítam vás na dnešnej diskusii. Moje meno je Samom Marec a budem sa rozprávať s Michaelom Finkelom, spisovateľom, novinárom, oceňovaným novinárom, ktorý písal pre mnohé rešpektované časopisy a denníky, napríklad pre The Atlantic, New York Times Magazine, National Geographic a tak ďalej, mohol by som pokračovať. Ale dnes sme tu preto, aby som sa s ním rozprával o jeho knihe Posledný pustovník, ktorá práve vyšla v vydavateľstve Absynt nedávno a máte možnosť si ju teda prečítať, je výborná. Ja iba pripomeniem dve veci. Toto podujatie sa koná vďaka podpore z Fondu na podporu umenia, to po prvé, a po druhé, akékoľvek otázky, čo sa budete chcieť Majka opýtať, nech sa páči, píšte nám na Facebook a my niektoré z nich vyberieme. To je všetko, môžeme začať. Hello Mike, so nice to see you.
Thank you, I'm honored to be here, I appreciate it.
You're in France right now, but you come from Montana, if I'm right. And when we had our test call, we discussed a few things. One of them was you liked ice hockey. What NHL team do you support?
First of all, I love ice hockey, and I even have the fake teeth to prove it. I like to play as well.
Okay.
I went to university in Philadelphia, and students could get seats to NHL games for $10 in the worst row in the whole stadium, and I went and sort of fell in love with the Philadelphia Flyers.
OK. Opýtal som sa Majka, lebo teda keď sme mali testovací hovor, tak sme sa rozprávali okrem iného o tom, že miluje hokej. A on ten hokej naozaj miluje, dokonca má umelé zuby, môže to dokázať. Ale keďže študoval na univerzite vo Filadelfii, tak ako študenti dostávali vtedy za $10 na zápas lístky v najhoršom rade a tým pádom sa zamiloval do Philadelphia Flyers. I love Toronto Maple Leafs for no apparent reason at all. And ever since I've been in love with them, they've not won anything. I don't know if it means anything. But okay. And another thing I've noticed, you've got a lovely candle there, just behind you. Why is that? And you've got a lot of other candles. Why is that?
I think it's just somewhere between a tradition and a superstition that whenever I start writing, I always light a candle on my desk, and it sort of indicates to me that it's time to get off of Twitter and to concentrate. And this candle back here is actually lit, meaning that I am not reading my email. I am here present with you.
Okay, very good. And does it work? It works, doesn't it?
I'm afraid to not do it, so let's just call it that.
Yeah. Takisto teda som si všimol, že tam po našej pravej strane Mike má takú veľkú červenú sviečku a ďalšie tam má v tom rade vzadu, tak som sa ho opýtal, že prečo. A je to teda rituál, je to taká jeho povera, ako keby, že vždy, keď začína písať, tak tú sviečku zapáli a to znamená, že teda už pracuje, už vypne Twitter a zapálená je aj teraz, to znamená, že je tu s nami. Okay, so you're with us now fully and concentrated. So my first question is going to be, actually, I found out about, I read your book about 2 months ago, but probably a month ago, I actually, by chance, read about Christopher Knight for a reason I can't remember anymore. And then I was suddenly like, oh, wait, I know this story. It's interesting. But how did you come across this story?
I like to read small town newspapers, and before the age of the internet, I often sometimes subscribed to small town newspapers, and now I just I review lots of them on the internet. If you want to jump in.
Opýtal som sa teda na to, ako sa dostal ku príbehu Christophera Knighta, lebo ja som ho čítal asi pred mesiacom úplne náhodou a potom som čítal knihu. On sa na neho narazil tak, že teda pred internetom veľmi rád čítal také tie noviny alebo periodika, ktoré vychádzajú v malých mestách, dokonca si ich predplácal a teraz ich číta na internete.
Yeah, in a small town newspaper in Maine and Montana in the United States are far apart,
We're
they're
now
both
following the US elections. Everyone in Slovakia knows the map of the US, especially, I think, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. We know everything about your country now.
I'm sorry. I can only apologize.
No problem.
I read in a small town newspaper in Maine about a man who, it seemed like fiction, a man who came out of the woods after more than 1/4 of a century, and there were very few words in the article, but every one of them made me more and more curious. And just at the very end of the article, it said that not only did this man spend 27 years in the woods, but that he read hundreds or perhaps thousands of books. And my two favorite pastimes in all the world are camping and reading. And I was like, this is like the world champion of both. I would like to meet this person.
Okay. V rámci teda čítania takých tých malých novín z malých miest našiel Mike príbeh, ktorý znel ako keby bol vymyslený, lebo to bol príbeh o mužovi, ktorý po viac ako štvrtstoročí vyšiel z lesa. A bol to krátky článok, nebolo v ňom nejak akože veľa informácií, ale okrem iného tam bolo napísané, že prečítal za ten čas ten muž stovky alebo možno až tisícky kníh za tých 27 rokov. A Mike si povedal, že tak to je svetový šampión v dvoch veciach, a síce ako v tej vytrvalosti v osamení a potom v čítaní kníh. A keďže on sám má veľmi rád samotu a čítanie kníh, to sú dve veci, ktoré ho bavia, tak si povedal, že ho rozhodne musí spoznať. Yeah, I actually had a look at Montana and I compared it to Slovakia. It's about 7.5 times bigger and there's 1 million people living there, which I think means that the density, the population density is about 40 times smaller. Montana must be a very lonely place.
I never think of it like that. In fact, I feel like 1 million people is a lot, but the truth of the matter is, of course, that there's a lot of wilderness, a lot of wide open space, and for people like Chris Knight, for sure, and someone, I think that's one of the reasons why we, I can't say we got a lot, why we spoke to each other, is that I feel very comfortable in places that seem like wilderness, and that's just something near to my heart.
Pozrel som sa teda na Montanu, odkiaľ Mike pochádza. Je to územie, teda ten štát je asi 7,5 krát väčší ako Slovensko. Žije tam zhruba 1 milión ľudí, čiže vychádza že to tak, že tá hustota obyvateľstva je asi 40 krát nižšia. Tak teda, že to musí byť také osamelé miesto. Mike hovorí, že 1 milión ľudí sa mu zdá pomerne aj že veľa, ale že na druhej strane je tam veľa divočiny, je tam veľa otvorených priestranstiev a práve vďaka tomu, ako keby si ku Christopherovi našiel cestu, lebo oboch spája to, že sa cítia pohodlne o samote a v takej divočine. And so I was thinking what this book reminds me of. And it reminds me of this story, I'm sure you know, it's called Into the Wild.
Of course.
And I've read it, I've watched the movie, I love the soundtrack, but I'm not a big fan of the main character. What he did just seems stupid to me, to be honest, right? I don't like him being described as much of a hero, but is it something that you would relate this story to?
Well, of course, I'm familiar with the story Into the Wild, and except for the fact that both of the people who escaped are named Chris, we have, other than that, I really feel that the stories are different, so different that I didn't even mention Into the Wild in my book. And I'll explain more after you translate.
Opýtal som sa na to, že pri čítaní tej knihy som si samozrejme spomenul na knihu Into the Wild, ktorú som čítal, film som videl, milujem soundtrack, ale že teda toho hlavného hrdinu nepovažujem za hrdinu, ktorého by bolo treba veľmi heroizovať, lebo že sa mi to jednoducho tak nezdá, ale že či tam je nejaká súvislosť medzi týmito dvoma knihami. A Mike hovorí, že tá súvislosť je určite v tom, že obidvaja tí hlavní hrdinovia sa volajú Chris. Ale že tú knihu Into the Wild vo svojej knihe nespomenul a urobil to naschvál a teraz nám povie prečo.
Yeah, I mean, the main difference, briefly, is that Chris McCandless, the person from Into the Wild, died after one season in the woods. And Christopher Knight came out as strong as an ox after 27 years. And there's a lot of smaller differences, but that alone really is makes the stories completely different.
Yeah. Tak jeden z tých hlavných, zásadný rozdiel je ten, že Chris McCandless, ktorý je hrdinom Into the Wild, vlastne zomrel. A zomrel po jednom ročnom období, ktoré strávil na Aliaške. A Chris Knight, o ktorom hovoríme dnes, zotrval vo svojom úkryte 27 rokov a potom odtiaľ vyšiel úplne v poriadku. When he came out and actually throughout, he was well groomed, well fed. He didn't look like a burglar or like a homeless person, which you would naturally expect him to. Why was that?
I'm sorry, what was the last word?
Why was that? Why did he care so well? Or did he look so well after himself? Or was it his intention to always be presentable or,
Right. When Chris Knight, the hermit in the book, was finally captured, he didn't look like he had been spending very much time in the woods. In fact, many people didn't believe his story. He didn't smell that bad. His clothing seemed clean. He was neatly shaven. His hair was neat. He was almost a little bit chubby, fat. And again, of course, these are all reasons not to believe the story. And I'll let you translate from there. But basically, in my relationship with Chris Knight, I went over every point to see what he would say. And I'll explain a few right now. For example, when he liked to shave, he always liked to make himself look presentable in case somebody saw him. He always kept clean clothes. He would eat as much as possible to stay fat for the winter. And I want to say that I spent 3 years researching this story, and as hard as it is to believe it, it's 100% true.
OK. Opýtal som sa teda, že Chris Knight naozaj nevyzeral ako človek, ktorý žije v ústraní a v divočine, nebol otrhaný, nebol chudý, nebol spustnutý, naopak vždy bol oholený, vždy bol dobre oblečený. A ono to malo niekoľko dôvodov. Mike hovorí, že dokonca kvôli tomu mu ľudia neverili, pretože bol oholený, bol ostrihaný, dobre oblečený, dokonca bol trošku aj pribratý. A oholený bol preto a ostrihaný, aby vyzeral dobre, keď by niekoho stretol. Jedol veľa preto, lebo sa pripravoval na zimu a Mike to všetko kontroloval. 3 roky tú knihu písal, pracoval na nej a môže teda určite potvrdiť, že všetko je to pravda. Before we continue, we've got a message from the guy who translated your book. It's actually a guy I studied with at the university. He's saying, "It was a pleasure to translate your book. Thank you. Kind regards, Martin Kubuš, sorry."
I mean, I first want to say thank you so much. I always have been jealous of photographers. I travel as a journalist with photographers, and no matter what language you speak, when you show someone a photograph, they can see it. And it's always hurt my heart that you can't do the same thing with a piece of writing. And I am extremely grateful to translators like you who are able to share one of the most interesting stories I've ever encountered in my life with other readers, especially in Slovakia. So thank you.
No vidíš, Maťo, tak bol si pochválený, pretože ako Mike hovorí, vždy závidel fotografom, pretože fotografie sú taký univerzálny jazyk. Celkom to neplatí teda pri písaní a práve preto je veľmi vďačný všetkým prekladateľom, ktorí sprostredkujú inojazyčnú literatúru obecenstvu. A hlavne v tomto prípade teda, že ty si sprostredkoval jeden z najzaujímavejších príbehov, s ktorým sa vôbec Mike vo svojej kariére stretol, tak veľká vďaka od Mikea a ja ťa pozdravujem a my môžeme pokračovať. So where were we at? He was chubby, he was well groomed and well shaven and eating for the winter.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the Chris Knight story, the hermit story, I guess one of the things we can talk about is how difficult it is to believe. Chris Knight said that he never lit a fire. He said that he never saw a doctor, and we're talking about 27 years. How could you go 27 years without seeing a doctor? It is unbelievably cold in Maine. How can you go even 1 week, let alone 1 month? Let alone 1 winter, let alone 27 winters without lighting a fire. And for my fellow campers out there, you know that when you put a lot of food in your tent, as he said he did, wild animals can come and eat that. Why didn't that happen? And I'll answer those questions after you translate.
Okay. Práve teda preto, že Chris vyzeral tak, ako vyzeral, tak naozaj mnohí ľudia verili, pretože on okrem iného tvrdil, že nikdy nezapálil oheň, nikdy nebol u lekára za 27 rokov. A teda zimy v Maine sú veľmi chladné. Sú také chladné, že veľmi ťažko si dokážete vôbec predstaviť, že tam prežijete takto vonku týždeň alebo mesiac a už vôbec nie zimu a už vôbec nie teda 27 takých zim. A napríklad ďalšia otázka bola, že dobre, skladoval si nejaké potraviny na zimu, prečo tam neprišla divá zver, čo by bolo prirodzené a prečo nejakým spôsobom ho nenapadla, nevyjedla mu to? A odpoveď na túto otázku sa dozvieme teraz.
Okay, let's start with the first one, which I think is the most relevant for today. How could he not get sick? Well, as every single person on planet Earth has learned over the last 6 months, one good way to not get sick is to social distance. Yeah. Now, almost every disease that humans have are transported between us by hugs and kisses and handshakes and touching a keyboard. And Chris Knight stayed away from all people. And I talked to many doctors. It makes complete sense that he would never get sick. Of course, you can still get something like cancer or diabetes, but none of the small sicknesses that we all pass around from each other. Chris was healthy for 27 years, and this is one of the reasons why I know from talking to him that social distancing actually does work.
OK. Začneme teda tou najrelevantnejšou otázkou, tak povediac, a síce prečo Chris nikdy neochorel? No, tak ako sme sa my počas posledných 6 mesiacov naučili všetci, tak najspoľahlivejší spôsob, ako neochorieť, je social distancing. Skoro každá choroba sa totiž prenáša buď dotykom, alebo boskom, alebo objatím, alebo dotykom na klávesnicu, jednoducho medziľudským kontaktom. No a medziľudský kontakt Chris nemal. A Mike sa rozprával s mnohými lekármi a tí mu teda potvrdili, že ono je to naozaj pravda, že samozrejme mohol by ochorieť na rakovinu, napríklad mohol by mať cukrovku, ale že také tie úplne bežné choroby, tak tie sa mu jednoducho práve preto vyhýbali a Mike mu aj práve preto verí. Yeah?
An easy one is about food. Chris Knight, for most of his food, he robbed small second homes in the vicinity near his campsite. He lived in one campsite for almost the entire quarter century in the woods, and he would take a bunch of food and put it in his site. I mentioned to my fellow campers that when there's food in your site, animals will come. But Chris Knight spent 99.9% of his time in his tent. And fellow campers, we know that animals are not going to come when you're there to frighten them away. So he was always there, so animals weren't going to come up. And if they were, he would shout. They'll only take your food when you're away somewhere else.
No a potom je tu druhá otázka toho jedla. Chris sa živil tým, že si ho zadovažoval, kradol z chatiek, ktoré sa nedaleko pri jazere nachádzali a potom si ho teda to jedlo nosil k sebe do toho svojho obydlia. Ale 99,9% času trávil práve v ňom. No a tí, ktorí sme niekedy stanovali, tak vieme, že keď v tom stane ste, no tak tie zvieratá tam jednoducho neprídu. Ak prídu, odplašíte ich krikom, ale že väčšinou prídu práve vtedy, keď tam nie ste. No a Chris vlastne tam stále bol, tak nebolo kedy.
Now let's talk about the cold. This to me, I'm saving this for last because this to me was the hardest for me to get my head around. We talked about Montana, many times bigger than Slovakia, and very few people, and a huge winter. A fire to me is essential to life. Chris Knight insisted that he never lit a fire. He was afraid that smoke would give his campsite away. And in fact, he was almost certainly right. The police sometimes flew over the top. They looked for a site. And before I answer how he survived, I want to say that I went to his site 6 different times. And because his story is so hard to believe, I just wanted to find one piece of evidence to prove he was lying. And I looked, for example, for one piece of burned wood, one thing that would contradict something he said, and I never found anything, which is one of the reasons why I know his story is true. I'll let you translate, and then we'll answer how did he survive.
No a teda taká, keďže Mike je z Montány, tak taká najzásadnejšia otázka bola teda ten chlad, tá zima. Pretože aj v Montáne, ale aj u nás na Slovensku tá zima vie byť teda poriadna. A Chris trval na tom, že ten oheň naozaj nikdy nezapálil, aj keď my si to úplne nevieme predstaviť, a neurobil to údajne preto, lebo ten dym by ho mohol prezradiť. A pravdepodobne v tom má naozaj pravdu, pretože polícia, keď ho hľadala, tak tam prelietávala a mohli to zbadať. Mike tam bol 6 krát na tom mieste, kde sa nachádzal jeho úkryt, a jeho cieľom vlastne bolo nájsť dôkaz, že Chris klame. Že nájde nejaký kus ohoreného dreva alebo niečo podobné. Nikdy nič také nenašiel, aj preto mu verí.
Okay, winters in Maine are often 30 degrees below 0 Celsius. The problem is hypothermia, meaning that cold will start at your fingers and your toes, and hypothermia will march like an invading army to your heart and eventually kill you.
But you'll die happy. I mean, it's a nice death. Okay, sorry, go on.
You want to translate?
Okay. Zimy teda v štáte Maine sú také, že tie teploty tam naozaj klesajú až do minus 30 stupňov Celzia a vlastne zomriete na podchladenie. No a to podchladenie v praxi vyzerá tak, že najprv strácate na prstoch, na rukách, na nohách, ono sa to postupne tak rozšíruje, až nakoniec teda je tá smrť.
When I was talking with Chris Knight, and I want to say that right here that first of all, I am so grateful to Chris Knight, the hermit, for sharing his story with me. I think 500 journalists tried to get in touch with Chris Knight, and he only responded to me. And you might ask why, and I think he just has very good taste in journalists. No, I'm very grateful to Chris. I wanted to thank him here. And when we met, he was in jail for stealing food, and we would speak over these old-fashioned telephones in the jail. And I remember saying to him, "So Chris, I suppose when it was very, very, very cold, what you would do is sort of huddle yourself in many blankets and get into like a fetal position and just sort of suffer through the night." And Chris had this way of looking at me when he was disappointed in my intelligence. He would didn't like to make eye contact, but he would do like this slow blink. It was like, and he said completely wrong. I'll let you share.
Okay. Mike je teda Chrisovi v prvom rade veľmi vďačný za to, že z 500 novinárov, ktorí sa uchádzali o možnosť rozprávať sa s tým, si vybral práve jeho. Ak sa pýtate, prečo, tak je to preto, lebo má samozrejme Chris veľmi dobrý vkus na novinárov, ale bolo to teda v situácii, keď sedel Chris vo väzení za to, že krádol jedlo a ešte nejaké ďalšie veci a rozprávali sa cez telefón. A on mu teda povedal, že Chris, predpokladám, že tú zimu strašnú si vydržal tak, že si sa zabalil do všetkého možného, čo si mal po ruke, dal si sa do fetálnej pozície a povedal si takto nejako vydržím noc. A ten Chris teda nebol človek, ktorý by nejako dodržiaval očný kontakt, ale vždy vtedy mal také gesto, že jednoducho tak veľmi pomaly zažmúril tie oči a povedal mu úplne nesprávne.
So Chris Knight wasn't sure of what year it was and even had to guess at the decade. But he had like a little watch with an alarm, so he knew the hour and the minute. It was very important to him. He told me that in the middle of winter, he trained himself to go to bed at 7 o'clock in the evening. And he would wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's a 7-hour sleep. 2 o'clock in the morning, which is pretty much the depth of cold, the most cold. And when I'll just speak for myself, when you and I bet you, would be the most wanting to just curl into our blanket, Chris Knight got out of his sleeping bag, got out of his tent. He took a bunch of snow and he put it on his camp pot to melt it for water and spent all night. He had a small campsite. It was like 25 paces. He walked around his site, just walking and walking to stay warm all night, every night, all winter for 27 winters, and never so much as lost a fingernail to frostbite. This is one tough dude.
Oh yeah. No, čiže Chris bol teda v situácii, kedy ho zatkli a on nevedel, aký je rok. Nevedel dokonca ani, aké je 10-ročie, ale mal hodinky, takže presne vedel, aká je hodina, aká je minúta. A to bolo pomerne dôležité, pretože si počas zimy teda vytvoril návyk, že chodil spávať o 7 večer a vstával o 2 ráno. No a všetci vieme, že teda o 2 ráno ten chlad asi aj úplne vrcholí a my sa najradšej tak zabalíme a spíme ďalej. A on vtedy vstal, rozbalil sa zo spacáku, vyšiel zo stanu, zobral nejaký sneh, roztopil ho a potom mal tam celý ten priestor, mal asi tak 25 krokov, tak celú noc, každú noc, všetky tie zimy počas 27 rokov, tých 25 krokov potom chodil dookola. A bol to teda riadne tvrdý chlap. Is now the time for you to show us the pictures of what it looked like over there.
Yeah, I think this is interesting. I'm going to go on to the share screen mode, and let's take a look at Chris Knight's camp. When Chris Knight left the world, he was 20 years old, and when he was captured, he was 47 years old. Think about that. Let me show you the spot where he spent the heart of his life. He was basically just a adolescent when he went into the woods, and he was a middle-aged man when he was captured. And you can translate while I find the photos.
Tak teraz teda ukážeme si, ako to naozaj na tom mieste vyzeralo, lebo Mike tam bol. Predstavte si to tak, že Chris, keď mal 20 rokov, tak vtedy do toho lesa vošiel a vyšiel odtiaľ, keď mal 47 rokov, čiže naozaj to gros svojho života tvorivého, alebo ako to nazveme, naozaj strávil tam, tak teraz sa pozrieme, ako to vyzerá a ja vám to budem postupne prekladať.
Okay. Here we go. Can you see it? Here we go. Well, you've all learned about the map of the United States. So Maine is in the upper right-hand corner. Let's see if we can get this going. 1 second.
Takže toto je tá mapa, ktorú všetci poznáme. Vidíte, aká je tam tá Montana veľká a prázdna. Maine je v pravom hornom rohu.
Okay, 1 sec. Let's just see what
Yeah.
There's Maine. Chris Knight's camp was right about where the letter A is in the word Maine.
Takže jeho tábor bol zhruba tam, teda presne tam, kde v slove Maine je to Ačko.
This is North Pond. about a 5-minute walk through the woods from where Chris Knight lived for 25 years.
Toto je severná nádrž, ktorá teda bola vzdialená asi 5 minút chôdze od toho miesta, kde Chris žil.
The pond is surrounded by simple cabins like this, and I believe there's another one. These are the cabins he broke into. They're only occupied in the summertime. Mm-hmm.
To jazero je obklopené takýmito pomerne jednoduchými chatkami, ešte asi tam bude aj ďalšia, a práve do nich on sa vlamoval, tak povediac, pretože obyvateľia tam sú v nich iba v lete.
This is his woods. It wasn't so much the thickness of the trees that made it difficult, but if you look towards the bottom, these enormous boulders covered with moss made the walking here so difficult that deer didn't even really like to walk through here. It was such a very challenging woods to walk through. Mm-hmm.
Tu vidíte teda fotografiu lesa, a ak sa pozriete, tak tie stromy nie sú veľmi nejako nahusto, to nie je problém. Problém je v tom, že sú tam obrovské kamene, sú pokryté machom, ťažko sa tam chodí a dokonca aj jelene sa v tom lese nerady vyskytovali, pretože naozaj to bolo zložité.
He was on private property that says no trespassing. It's private property. He spent 27 years on private property.
Nachádzal sa na súkromnom pozemku, na ktorom bolo napísané zákaz vstupu súkromný pozemok, tak tam strávil 27 rokov.
His woods, the woods, just a few pictures of the woods.
Tu máme ďalšie fotografie toho lesa. Now we can see how well he was covered from the top, right? I mean, you can't really see anything from the very top.
You can see right there that it's very, this is why when he was captured, his skin was very, very pale. It was very weird. Yep.
To môžete vidieť, že aké husté sú tie koruny stromov, že nielen, že tam nie je veľmi vidno z vrchu, ale aj to slnko nesvieti, čiže aj Chris mal veľmi bledú pokožku, keď ho chytili.
Now I'm a strong hiker and I thought that I was very tough man, but this is my hand putting my hand onto one of the boulders. You can see how thick the moss is, and I'll let you translate, and I'll show you in the next slide what happened when I put my boot on it and found out that this moss is as slippery as ice, and despite being a hockey player, I wasn't ready.
OK. Takže Mike je pomerne skúsený a silný turista. Tu vidíte fotografiu, že aká hrubá bola tá vrstva machu podľa tej ruky. A na ďalšej fotografii uvidíme, čo sa stalo, keď sa na nej pošmykol, lebo teda okrem toho, že je hokejista, tak tento mach to bol ako ľad a nebol na to pripravený.
There we go. Too bad. Sliced my hand right open. And,
Takto si rozrezal ruku, môžete to vidieť.
Now look carefully. This is about 10 meters from Chris Knight's site. It's very hard to see.
Teraz, ak sa pozriete, tak toto je fotografia zhruba z 10 metrov toho táboriska a stále si môžete všimnúť, že ho len s ťažkosťami si ho všimnete naozaj, že ho nie je veľmi vidieť.
There we go. That is what it looked like. Here a few pictures will show.
Takto to tam vyzeralo.
You can see that with his pots and pans and his garbage cans, he painted them in a camouflage pattern so that they would be more disguised.
Napríklad si môžete všimnúť, že všetky tie panvice a riady a odpadové koše napríklad namaloval maskačovo, aby ich bolo o to ťažšie vidieť.
That's where he stored water in those in that big plastic bin, and you can see his cooking stove, fuel, everything here he stole. There is nothing here that he had with him. He stole everything.
V tej veľkej plastovej nádrži skladoval vodu, okrem toho tu vidíte napríklad teda plynové bomby, vďaka ktorým si varil. A všetko to, čo tam vidíte, ukradol, nič si do toho lesa nepriniesol.
I'm not sure if anyone out there has read the book, but this was Chris Knight's closest friend in the woods. This was his mushroom. And I remember when I spoke to Chris Knight in jail, of all the things he was worried about, he was concerned that when the police came to his site to take everything away, that they had knocked down this mushroom. He had watched it grow for 25 years. And I went to the woods and I found the mushroom and I showed Chris Knight this picture and he was really happy that it was still there.
OK. Pre tých z vás, ktorí už knihu čítali, tak viete. Pre tých, ktorí nečítali, máte ďalší dôvod. Toto je najbližší priateľ Chrisa Wooda, alebo teda bol. Vidíte, že je to huba. A keď sa Mike s ním rozprával, tak Chris mal práve tú obavu, že polícia, keď do toho táboriska vtrhla, tak tú hubu mohla poškodiť. A on ju 25 alebo 27 rokov videl, ako ju rastie, tak mali blízky vzťah. Čiže Mike tam potom išiel, urobil fotografiu a ukázal ju Chrisovi, že všetko je OK.
This is some of the items that he stole from the camps.
Tu sú nejaké veci, ktoré teda ukradol z iných tam táborísk a z tých chatiek.
He loved flashlights.
Ja. Môžete vidieť, že mal veľmi rád a blízky vzťah k baterkám. There's a Game Boy there, isn't it?
Chris Knight had a very strict Game Boy stealing rule. Yes, that is a Game Boy down there. When he was if you could say it, he was a polite thief. When he broke into a house and he saw a Game Boy, he would never want to take any young person's new Christmas gift. He would only take Game Boys that were at least 2 generations old. And he figured, he would be stealing these new ones in a couple of years later. So that was his strict Game Boy rule. OK. Môžete vidieť, že tu na fotografii je niekoľko Gameboyov a Chris teda mal také pravidlo, čo sa týka ich kradnutia. A síce, že nikdy by nikomu neukradol vianočný darček, teda ten najnovší model. Vždy bral tak 2 generácie pozadu, pretože okrem iného vedel, že aj tie, ktoré sú teraz najnovšie, tak jedného dňa budú o 2 generácie pozadu a bude si ich môcť zobrať. This is his kitchen. He sat on that green bucket. And the green stove right there is where he would cook on. And behind the green bucket is his bedroom, the tent. Tu vidíte jeho kuchyňu na zelenom vedre. Sedel tam vedľa je zelený varič, tam si varil a vzadu za ním spálňa, teda ten stan samotný. You can see that this clothesline, the tree has grown all the way around it. And in Maine, trees grow very slowly. And something like this takes decades to happen. There was even a hammer, I don't have a picture of it on this slide reel, where the tree sort of grew around the hammer. And one of the arresting police officers said it was things like this, the tree growing around clotheslines and hammers, that made him realize that Chris Knight was telling the truth about being there for so long. Tu si môžete všimnúť, že je tam uviazané nejaké lano a že vlastne ten strom okolo neho obrástol, niečo také trvá niekoľko desaťročí. Takisto, nemáme to tu na fotografii, ale tam sa nachádzalo aj kladivo, ktoré ten strom takisto obrástol. A teda policajti, ktorí boli na mieste, jeden z nich povedal, že aj vďaka takýmto veciam uverili tomu, že ten Chris tam naozaj 27 rokov bol, pretože ono to niekoľko desaťročí trvá. If you look carefully, you can almost see a clothespin attached to the clothesline. It's just to the right of the tree. And the reason why it's hard to see is because Chris Knight was so careful that he even painted his clothespin green. Here it is. I took it from the site. And you can see that something that's normally brown, he had taken the time to paint it green. And you could just see it in the corner of the picture there. It's the same one. Tam v rohu tej fotografie môžete vidieť štipec. A teda Chris išiel až do takej miery do toho, že aj dokonca štipce, ktoré normálne sú hnedé, tak nakreslil na zeleno. Mike vám ho teraz ukázal, je to ten istý štipec. And we will end with the only picture ever taken in 27 years of Chris Knight himself at his camp, which was taken by the police officer that arrested him, and Chris Knight showed him where he lived. And this will end with this, the only picture of Chris Knight at the place where he lived for 27 years, sitting in, you can see his bedroom behind, and there he is. He doesn't look like, he's an oldish man at this point. But he's not excited. He's not very excited. OK, takže toto je jediný záber Chrisa Knighta priamo v jeho stane a v tom jeho táborisku, ktorý urobili policajti práve vtedy, keď ho tam prichytili. Vzadu vidíte ten stan, v ktorom spával. Tu vidíte muža už v strednom veku, mal 47 rokov. Je to jediná fotografia.
takéhoto druhu, tak nech sa páči. Okay, and now my question is going to be the reason, the way it happened was, he was 20 years old, as you said. He was in the wood, stopped the car, got out of the car, walked into the wood for no apparent reason. Am I right?
The question I think you're asking is the most important one. We talked already about how did he survive? Was he telling the truth? I think we all have realized in the conversation that he was telling the truth, and we now know how he survived. I think the question you're coming around to is the most important one. Why? Why would someone leave the world for 27 years, especially leaving at age 20?
Yeah. Opýtal som sa teda, lebo ono sa to stalo takto. Chris mal 20 rokov, bol na aute v lese, auto odstavil, vystúpil z neho, vošiel do lesa bez nejakého čitateľného dôvodu a Mike veľmi dobre pochopil moju otázku, pretože povedal, zatiaľ sme si povedali, ako tam prežil v tom lese, utvrdili sme sa v tom, že sa to všetko naozaj stalo, to sme si ukázali, ako prežil, ukázali sme si, že je to pravda a teraz sme pri tej otázke, že prečo.
Let's answer this question. Why? First of all, humans are really social creatures. This is a very interesting story because we're not used to being alone. During the reporting for this story, I asked hundreds of people, what's the longest they've ever been alone? And most people, and when I say alone, I mean no talking on the phone, no sending a text message, no seeing anybody else. Almost everyone have never gone one day of their life alone. And I consider myself a good outdoorsman, and my record is 3 days alone. So we really are social creatures. We don't like to be alone. This is one of the reasons why this story is very disturbing on some level. And I'll answer why.
But you asked those people pre-corona, right? I think they might have changed their answers now.
Although everybody's Zooming, so I'm not considering this alone.
That's true. I don't feel alone. No, čiže podstata je v tom, že ľudia sú naozaj spoločenské tvory. Mike sa počas písania tej knihy stoviek ľudí opýtal, ako dlho boli o samote. Väčšina z nich povedala, že teda ani jeden deň a pritom ešte teda mohli telefonovať, byť nejakým iným spôsobom v kontakte s ľuďmi. A on sám, ktorý často je sám, veď je z Montany, tak najdlhšie bol, že 3 dní. Čiže jeden z tých aspektov, ktoré sú také ako keby rušivé v tom príbehu, že naozaj 27 rokov tu bol takýto človek.
Okay, well, I'm still going to tease you before I answer this question. Despite the fact that 99% of us don't really like to be alone, throughout human history, as far back as we've recorded history, there have always been a very few people that really want to be by themselves.
Yeah.
And while that is interesting unto itself, what I find more interesting is that some of these people who want to be alone have been some of the most influential people that have ever existed. Mm-hmm. And I will give you 3 examples of people that you could call hermits. Mm-hmm. I'll go with Jesus, Muhammad, and Buddha. Mm-hmm. Jesus in the Judean desert, 40 days by himself. Muhammad in a cave outside of Mecca. The Buddha underneath a tree in modern day India, all by themselves alone. And at this moment, 3 billion humans follow the religion brought back by these hermits. We all pray to hermits. Let's just talk about that.
Pravda je teda taká, že 99% ľudí nevyhľadáva nejako vyloženie tú samotu, ale z celej vlastne zaznamenanej ľudskej histórie vieme, že vždy existovali nejakí ľudia, ktorí tú samotu mali radi. A to samé o sebe je zaujímavé, ale ešte zaujímavejšie je to, že práve títo ľudia patrili k tým najvplyvnejším vôbec v histórii. Máme tu 3 príklady. Ježiš, Mohamed a Budha. Ježiš 40 dní v púšti, Mohamed v jaskyni pri Meke, Budha v Indii pod stromom. takto tam o samote sedeli a teraz 3 miliardy ľudí veria teda vo náboženstvo, ktoré oni hlásali.
So I said to Chris Knight, why?
Yeah.
And his answer was both, I think, simple and quite profound at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
First, he said that all his life, he never really felt uncomfortable with other people. He felt that meeting other people, and sometimes humans do have, you can embarrass yourself when you're having a conversation. It can be difficult. He always felt uncomfortable being around other people. He felt comfortable being alone. And we all remember when it's like to be maybe 20 years old. You can do things that are quite dramatic and not very well planned, which is what he did. He basically, it looked like he left for a 2-day camping trip and ended up staying for 25 years. So why did he leave? He left because he called it like a gravitational pull. He said that he felt this gravitational pull to be by himself. But what really is profound isn't why he left. It is why he stayed for 27 years. And I'll answer after this translation.
Okay. Čiže už sa pomaly dostávame k otázke prečo. Je to tak povediac taká zásadná vec a síce, že Chris celý život sa necítil pohodlne pri ostatných ľuďoch, v interakcii s ostatnými ľuďmi a oveľa lepšie sa cítil sám. No, keď máte 20 rokov, tak to si možno pamätáte, ja si to pamätám. Človek dokáže robiť pomerne zásadné rozhodnutia bez toho, aby ich mal nejako veľmi premyslené. A on sa vlastne na 2 dní vybral na stanovačku, no a ostal tam tých 27 rokov, pretože ako sám hovorí, tak cítil takú gravitačnú príťažlivosť. No a takto, keď sme zodpovedali otázku, že prečo sa do toho pustil, tak ešte máme zásadnejšiu otázku, že v tom zotrval.
So I talked about how difficult it was in the winter where Chris Knight would get up early and walk around his campsite. That didn't sound very fun. But when I asked Chris Knight why and why did he stay, this is what he said. And remember, I think that even though Chris Knight is a very unusual person, I think all of us as humans are seeking pretty much the same thing in life, which is to be as content as possible, whatever makes you answer that question, what makes you the most content. I think that's what we're all seeking, whether it's a spouse or where you live or what your job is. We're all seeking happiness, as the American Constitution says, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I'm going to go on for a little bit. And when I asked Chris Knight why he stayed, he said to me, he loved it. We're in the woods. He was happy there. He was content. He had never felt that contentment before. He expressed more happiness about his life and his choices than most people I meet out here in the world. And now we have a virus now, but before the virus struck, there would be, I would say, maybe once or twice a day where I would be, maybe just to say, I would be in my car, stuck in traffic. I have 3 young children, my children screaming or fighting in the back, my cell phone going bing, 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 bing with messages. The news on the radio is bad news, more bad news, and more bad news. I'm late, I'm stressed, I need money. And I'm thinking, it's not Chris Knight who's crazy, and maybe it's the rest of us.
No, hovorili sme o tom, ako to bolo počas tej zimy v Maine zložité, že to chodenie okolo toho stanu, to možno nebola úplná taká sranda. Ale teda otázka, prečo ostal, na to je odpoveď, že protiotázka je, že čo všetci hľadáme. Všetci hľadáme situáciu, alebo teda život, v ktorom cítime čo najväčšiu spokojnosť. Najväčšie šťastie, či už ako miesto, kde žijeme, alebo práca, ktorej sa venujeme, alebo to, čo celkovo robíme, čo nás obklopuje. No a Chris hovoril, že teda on to tam v tom lese, na tom svojom mieste miloval, že tam bol šťastný, nikde inde šťastnejší nebol. A Mike dokonca hovorí, že on sa o tom svojom živote vyjadroval o mnoho ako keby pozitívnejšie ako absolútna väčšina ľudí, ktorých bežne Mike vo svojom živote stretával. A teda ak si aj on napríklad spomenie na život pred vírusom, tak minimálne raz alebo dvakrát za deň sa odstol v situácii, že sedel v aute, má 3 deti, mobil mu stále pípal, zlé správy z rádia, bol vystresovaný, niekam sa ponáhľal a meškal a povedal si vtedy, že to my sme tí, ktorí to majú nesprávne a práve Chris je ten, ktorý to má správne. So you said that we might be the ones who somehow got it wrong. Is it just a bold statement or do you actually agree with that?
I think I said for 1 or 2 moments each day. No, I love my friends and I love my family and I couldn't give up all those things. My larger point, and I think one of the reasons why writing this book held my interest is that it's easy to dismiss someone like Chris Knight as a crazy person. I think it's more important to listen to what he might have to say. And I'm not saying we need to go and hide for 27 years. But if there's one thing I could say to everyone, and that I've learned from Chris Knight, is that if we all took just a few minutes a day to do nothing, nothing, don't look at your phone. You can be in a city, you can look around, just relax. I think the temperature, the global temperature, and I don't even mean global warming, I mean societal craziness. You can see what's happening in the United States and elsewhere. If we could just lower that by 1 degree, I think it would be a lot better. And I think we're all going a little crazy. I think modern society might be a little much. And we don't have to go away for 27 years, but maybe rather than say Chris Knight is a crazy man and rejecting him, maybe listen to some of the things he has to say. And that's it. I'm not saying he's right and we're wrong. I'm just saying that he might have something to say.
OK. Opýtal som sa teda Majka, lebo povedal, že uvažoval, či ten Chris nemal pravdu, že či to naozaj aj myslel vážne. No a ten teda zopakoval, že fakt minimálne raz alebo dvakrát za deň si to povedal, ale že tá pointa, aj to, čo by chcel tou knihou povedať, aj taký apel, ktorý mal vyplynúť z tejto diskusie, je ten, že je veľmi ľahké Chrisa odsúdiť ako nejakého blázna, ale oveľa rozumnejšie je počúvať, čo nám vlastne hovorí. Aj Mike praví, že no dobre, no nemusíme na 27 rokov ísť do lesa, ale napríklad každý z nás by si mohol každý deň nájsť niekoľko minút priestor na to, aby si oddychol, aby nepozeral do mobilu, aby nepozeral televíziu, aby sa nenechal rozptýlovať. Pretože okolo seba v modernej spoločnosti vníma isté také šialenstvo, ktoré keby sa nám podarilo znížiť o 1 stupeň, tak by to bolo super. A práve to je vec, ktorou by sme sa teda od Chrisa Knighta mohli inšpirovať. We've got 5 minutes and I've got about 15 questions that have not been answered yet. That's awful.
But I think we got to some profound things, and so I feel like that's the most important thing. And I would also like, let's talk about a little bit about the current climate. We're all dealing with this virus. If you're anything like me, I'm a journalist. I loved talking to Chris Knight, but I make my living traveling and talking to strangers. And so I'm also mentally struggling with this virus. I mean, I'm not a hermit at all. I love meeting new people. That's my whole life. So I know probably many of you out there are also struggling. And I'll give you a little bit of advice that I learned also from Chris Knight, besides doing nothing, that the one person you only can really, really, truly know fully is yourself. We really, we try to avoid that, but that's the truth. We're all locked in our own heads. We can never entirely know someone else. And the more you get to know yourself, the more comfortable you are with yourself, I think the more satisfied you'll be. And again, it's just like being quiet. I think that'll help the world to get along. So if we could all take this time during the virus to get to know ourselves a little bit better, that is a lot easier said than done. It is difficult. It's frightening. Then maybe there can be silver lining to this virus. And I just want to thank Chris Knight again for giving me these ideas to think about. I love being a journalist, and I'm a project that truly grabs me is a project that also changes me. And I think my time with Chris Knight has done that. Thank you.
Taká je smutná tá situácia, že momentálne už máme iba 3 minúty a tu mám fakt ešte asi 20 otázok, ale Mike by teda chcel trošku niečo povedať k tej súčasnej situácii počas pandémie, pretože on sám ako novinár veľa cestuje a vlastne jeho živobytie je postavené na tom, že sa rozpráva s cudzími ľuďmi a z princípu nie je pustovník. A teraz sa prihovára k vám a hovorí, že teda mnohí z vás sa tiež môžu cítiť, že sa nejak scvrkol ten ich svet, že sú osamelí, ale že on sa od Chrisa Knighta naučil jednu vec, a síce, že existuje jeden človek, ktorého môžete úprimne naozaj a do hĺbky spoznať, a to ste vy sami. Čím viac sa spoznáte, tým to bude lepšie, tým sa aj vám bude lepšie žiť. A potom je tam ešte taký ten idealizmus, že ak sa všetci spoznáme poriadne, a nie je to jednoduché, ale že možno potom aj ten svet bude o niečo lepší a možno z toho vírusu nakoniec vyvodíme niečo pozitívne a že teda za toto zistenie aj on vďačí Chrisovi Knightovi. Okay, very, very last question. So how is Chris these days? I mean, is he all right as a regular member of our boring society, or how is he?
I don't want to give too much away if you haven't read the book, but there was concern that Chris Knight, he didn't come out of the woods voluntarily. He was arrested. He wanted to spend his whole life in the woods, and he expressed to me that he might commit suicide, kill himself. So 2 quick updates. Mm-hmm. First of all, thank you to everyone who's taken the time to listen to me ramble on. I know there's a lot better looking people that you could have watched for the last hour. So thank you. Exactly. Thank you so much. And Chris Knight, I'm happy to report, is alive and well. Mm-hmm. He said to me that if he ever wanted to talk to me again, he would write me a letter, and he has not. We are not in contact, but I do keep tabs on him. He's alive and well, and he has not gone back to the woods. He's still living in town, but I can also hear a little voice in my ear when I say he has not gone back to the woods. The little Chris Knight voice in my ear says, not yet.
Posledná otázka je teda taká, že ako sa Chris Knight má, či funguje v rámci našej nudnej spoločnosti. A teda bez toho, aby sme niečo veľmi prezrádzali, z lesa nevyšiel dobrovoľne, bol zatknutý, chcel tam stráviť celý život. Dokonca Mikeovi hovoril, že uvažuje nad samovraždou, ale teda update momentálny je taký, že Chris žije, má sa dobre. Mikeovi povedal, že ak by mu niekedy chcel napísať list, tak mu ho napíše. Zatiaľ mu ho nenapísal, takže všetko je asi v poriadku. Nevrátil sa do toho lesa, aj keď Mike hovorí, že stále tam niekde počuje ten hlas, ten Chrisov hlas, ktorý mu hovorí, že no, nevrátil som sa do lesa, ale nevrátil som sa iba zatiaľ. Mike, thank you so much. The great thing is, we've talked about the book, but we've not said much about the book itself, which is great. But I think this has been an inspirational discussion with a lot of insight, a lot of thoughts to think about some more, which I really do appreciate. And I hope that we've given our audience enough incentives to go and read your brilliant book. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate you having me here. And as I expressed before, I'm grateful that you've chosen to feature this story. There's so many books out there and so many writers. I don't take it for granted, but I really am I really find this story to offer everyone maybe a little nugget of wisdom. And what more can we really ask for in life?
Poďakoval som sa teda Mikeovi za to, že porozprávali sme sa o knihe, zároveň sme o nej veľa nepovedali, ale dúfame, že sme vás inšpirovali, pretože to bola veľmi zaujímavá diskusia, o ktorej možno budete ešte rozmýšľať aj ďalej. Ďakujeme veľmi pekne Mikeovi. Mike ďakuje nám za to, že kniha v slovenčine vychádza a ja vám už naozaj môžem len odporúčiť, aby ste si ju prečítali. Je fantastická. Moje meno je Samom Marec. Rozprával som sa s Michaelom Finkelom. Mike, thank you so much. Have a good evening over there in France.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Samu. And thank you for taking the time to ask such interesting questions and do the difficult work of translation. Have a good night, everybody.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Good night.
Good night.